My roommate filmed hundreds of videos on my bed while I was in class, told me I was ruining her life over nothing, just some content that wasn't personal. I just stared at her. That was 9 months ago. Today, she sobbed through an 8-year federal prison sentence. Who was the worst roommate you ever had? I came back to our dorm room between classes because I'd forgotten my statistics textbook and walked into a smell that definitely wasn't mine. My roommate Hazel was supposed to be at her 3-hour chemistry lab like she was every Tuesday and Thursday, and our tiny shared room looked normal at first glance until I noticed my bed was completely messed up, even though I always made it perfectly before leaving for my 8 a.m. class. Her bed across from mine was still pristine, but my sheets were pulled wrong and my stuffed elephant that my dead grandma gave me was on the floor, which sent a weird chill through me because I always kept it on my nightstand. Something felt so wrong that I started looking around my side of the room more carefully and noticed my expensive face cream was almost empty when I'd just bought it, and there were stains on my comforter that definitely weren't there this morning. I was about to text Hazel asking what happened when I noticed her laptop was open on her desk, still logged into some website I didn't recognize. The screen showed a dashboard with video thumbnails, and when I looked closer, I almost threw up because they were clearly taken in our dorm room, specifically on my bed with my recognizable cloud patterned sheets, while her perfectly made bed was visible in the background untouched. The titles were things like College Roomie's Bed While She's at Class and Risky Fun on Her Side, with thousands of views and comments from people saying how hot it was that she was doing this on her roommate's bed without permission. Then I clicked on one from yesterday and saw her and some random guy having intimacy on my bed while hers sat empty 3 feet away, using my pillow, with my stuffed elephant visible in the shot like some kind of sick prop while she told him, "My uptight roommate won't be back from class for 2 more hours." I downloaded everything and ran to my friend's room down the hall, barely able to breathe while showing her what I'd found. Within an hour, half our floor was crammed into the common room staring at my laptop in complete horror, and our RA was pacing back and forth saying this was the most insane violation she'd ever seen in 5 years of working student housing. The girl who lived next door said she'd been wondering why she heard those kinds of noises during my Tuesday morning statistics class when Hazel was supposed to be at chemistry lab, and another girl said she'd seen different guys leaving our room at times when she knew I was in my back-to-back Tuesday classes. The IT major who lived upstairs helped me trace the payment history and found out Hazel had made over $15,000 from these videos in the past semester, all while contaminating my bed and belongings. We found videos going back to September, mere weeks after we'd been randomly assigned as roommates, and in some of them she was literally wearing my clothes that she'd taken from my closet. The worst one showed her telling some guy that her virgin prude roommate who sleeps in that bed every night would die if she knew what was happening in it, and they both laughed while doing things that made me want to burn every piece of fabric I owned. Our RA called an emergency meeting with Residential Life, but the director said they needed more time to investigate before taking action, which made everyone furious because we had literal video evidence of her violating every housing rule about respecting shared spaces. And Hazel's dad was a major donor, so we all had a pretty good idea of how that investigation would pan out. The girl who worked at the front desk told us Hazel had been signing in different guys all semester using fake names and saying they were there to see other people on our floor, clearly timing it for when I had my predictable class schedule. She knew exactly when I'd be gone because we'd exchanged schedules at the beginning of the semester for emergencies, and she'd been using that information to turn my bed into her personal film set. The building's security footage showed her bringing in camera equipment and setting it up specifically angled at my bed during my morning classes, meaning she'd been planning these videos around my schedule for months. The president of student government happened to be friends with my neighbor, and when she heard about it, she said, "This psycho is getting the Model Resident Award tomorrow for being an exemplary community member, and we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of community member she really is." I was all in. There was no way I was waiting for a formal investigation, not after what Hazel had done. The next evening, the entire dorm was gathered in the student union for the semester awards ceremony, and Hazel was sitting in the front row wearing a dress I recognized from my closet that had mysteriously disappeared last month. She kept turning around and waving at people, completely unaware that everyone in that room knew what she'd done, all of us just waiting for the perfect moment. The Residential Life director was going through the awards, and when he announced Hazel's name for the Model Resident Award, she stood up beaming while everyone clapped politely, even though we were all seething inside. She walked to the podium and started giving this speech about how much she valued respect and creating a safe space for everyone, actually saying, "I believe trust between roommates is sacred," while I sat in the back row with my phone connected to the building's casting system. My finger hovered over the button that would stream her confession video to every TV screen in the student union, and I stood up as she continued talking about integrity, my voice cutting through her speech. "Really, Hazel? Trust is sacred? Then explain this." I pressed play. The screens lit up with Hazel's face from yesterday when I'd confronted her in our room, and her voice filled the entire auditorium. "Yeah, I've been using her bed for months. That uptight virgin doesn't even know what real fun looks like." The residential director jumped toward the AV controls while Hazel, still standing at the podium with her shiny new award, went completely pale. The video switched to her account dashboard showing the $15,000 balance, then cut to her laughing about how I made my bed perfect every morning and had no clue what she'd been doing on it. Parents started gasping, students whipped out their phones to record, and Felix Dodson shot up from his VIP seat in the front row yelling something about suing everyone in the building. Hazel dropped the microphone with a screech of feedback and tried to run, but she tripped over the hem of her dress, my dress that she'd stolen last month, and hit the floor hard. Cameron Wong stood up from her seat and shouted over the chaos, "This is your model resident. She violated her roommate for money." The crowd went absolutely nuts. The residential director finally got to the controls, but Nathan Guerra stepped in front of him, saying loud enough for everyone to hear, "They need to see this. You've been covering for her because her dad gives money. The director's face went bright red, but 3 more students from our floor moved to block him too, and he couldn't get through without physically shoving them. Campus security showed up at the doors but stopped, looking confused. This was an official event, and the screens were supposed to be on for presentations. The video had switched to Hazel explaining her fake chemistry lab schedule while she was actually filming on my bed, and parents were grabbing their kids and heading for the exits. Hazel scrambled to her feet and charged at me screaming, "You ruined everything!" But my whole row of dormmates stood up between us like a wall. Her dad was pushing through the crowd, literally waving his checkbook at the president's table like that would somehow fix this. The video switched to the worst part, her telling some guy about using my grandma's stuffed elephant in her videos, saying, "The stupid thing means everything to her. She'd die if she knew." My RA grabbed my shoulders while I shook, and someone's mom in the audience yelled, "That's sick! Someone call the police!" The university president grabbed a microphone trying to calm everyone down, but Hazel's voice kept playing over him, talking about how she specifically picked my bed because virgins need to learn somehow. Felix Dodson yanked cables out of the AV system, but Nathan had set up backup connections. The video kept playing on half the screens. Now it showed her schedule with all my classes highlighted, proving she'd planned every single recording around my Tuesday-Thursday routine. The campus newspaper reporters pushed through with cameras asking Hazel if she really made $15,000. She swung her purse at them while her dad tried blocking cameras, but more student journalists showed up recording everything on their phones. The police arrived just as the video showed Hazel counting cash and bragging about the 15 grand from that prude's bed. One officer headed toward the stage while another asked what was happening, and our whole floor started chanting, "Justice for victims." The video showed timestamps. She'd done this during my exact class times all semester. Hazel tried to grab someone's phone, but Aria Phelps pushed her back, and the president ordered everyone to leave, but nobody moved. The video was showing Hazel's recording from just 2 days ago. This wasn't some old mistake. She was still doing it. Felix Dodson screamed at me, "You'll pay for this!" But the RA stepped between us. "Sir, your daughter committed crimes. Threatening the victim won't help." Security finally started escorting them out while everyone booed, and as they dragged Hazel toward the exit, she screamed, "That money was mine. I earned it." Everyone gasped at her complete lack of remorse. Cameron grabbed the mic. "The administration knew about this and did nothing. There's something odd about how quickly everyone jumped to help once this went public. Where were all these supportive neighbors when those strange noises were happening for months? Makes me wonder if people knew more than they're letting on but stayed quiet until it became a spectacle worth recording." The video ended with footage of her signing in guys under fake names, testimony from the front desk worker, and screenshots of every video title. Parents were storming the president's table demanding answers. News crews showed up because someone had live-streamed the whole thing, and the residential director tried to talk, but students shouted over him, "You protected her for donor money." I left with my dormmates surrounding me as reporters shouted questions. Aria told one reporter, "We knew something was wrong, but nobody listened until she found proof herself." Back at the dorm, Hazel's stuff was already boxed up in the hallway with an official evicted notice taped to the boxes. The RA called an emergency floor meeting while Nathan started offering to check other girls' rooms for hidden cameras. Within an hour, our "Justice for Roommate" was trending everywhere, and 3 more girls came forward saying Hazel had tried to get into their rooms too, showing keycard access records from the front desk. The university sent out a vague email about today's incident, but someone immediately leaked internal emails showing they'd known about complaints for weeks. The student newspaper posted everything online with the headline, "Administration chose donor money over student safety." Hazel's social media accounts disappeared within hours, but screenshots were everywhere. Someone found her other accounts where she'd been selling exclusive content, using my clothes and belongings as props. That night, 20 girls from different dorms shared their own stories about violations they'd never reported because they thought no one would care. The RA actually cried, saying she should have pushed harder when I first came to her. Security swept the building and found 2 more cameras Hazel had hidden in the hallway to track when people left their rooms. Nathan documented everything for the police while girls on our floor realized she'd been watching multiple potential victims, timing their schedules. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. News vans were parked outside our dorm, and the university had made all classes optional because half the campus was either being interviewed or watching the coverage online. My mom called crying because she'd seen everything on the news back home, and I had to convince her I was okay, even though I wasn't really sure if that was true. Felix Dodson's company put out this cold statement saying they weren't involved in his personal family matters, which made everyone laugh because he'd literally been waving his checkbook around at the ceremony. That's when I got an email that changed everything. Lillian Archer, this lawyer who'd seen the story, offered to represent me pro bono. She wrote that what I did was brave, but now I needed legal protection because these were actual federal crimes, not just university policy violations. When we talked on the phone, she explained how each video Hazel made was a separate count of invasion of privacy and illegal recording, plus the financial aspect made it even worse. The residential director got suspended that same day after thousands of students signed a petition demanding his removal. Someone leaked emails showing he'd specifically told his staff to handle the donor's daughter carefully when the first vague complaints came in weeks ago. Reading those emails made me so angry. They'd known something was wrong and chose to protect her instead of investigating. Then things got bigger than just our campus. Other universities started doing emergency sweeps of their dorms, and 2 more girls at different schools were caught doing the exact same thing. It became clear that schools everywhere had been ignoring this kind of violation to avoid scandals and keep donor money flowing. The whole higher education system was getting called out, and my story had somehow triggered this massive reckoning. Hazel tried to come back for her stuff a few days later, but security met her at the door with an official trespass notice. Someone filmed her having a complete meltdown in the parking lot, screaming about her rights and how we'd stolen her property. In her rage, she accidentally accidentally admitted on camera that yes, she'd used my bed specifically because that uptight bitch deserved it. Her dad tried to grab the phone filming her, but that just made everything worse. The DA's office called me in to give a formal statement, and that's when I learned the full scope of what they were charging her with. 47 counts total: invasion of privacy, illegal recording, and profiting from illegal recordings. Each video was being treated as a separate crime, and because she'd crossed state lines digitally by uploading them, federal charges were possible too. The prosecutor, this no-nonsense woman who reminded me of my high school principal, said Hazel was looking at serious prison time. My parents wanted to handle everything quietly at first, but after seeing how the university had tried to cover it up, they agreed we needed to be public about it. The parent Facebook groups were going absolutely insane. Moms and dads threatening to pull their kids out unless the administration made real changes. The university president called an emergency board meeting while more victims from previous semesters started coming forward with their own stories about things that had been dismissed or ignored. The payment site where Hazel had made her money froze her account immediately and announced they were cooperating fully with law enforcement. That $15,000 she'd bragged about was evidence now, and they were working to identify everyone who'd bought her videos. Some of those guys were probably about to have very uncomfortable conversations with police. I started seeing a therapist at the counseling center, though they were so swamped with students worried about their own rooms that I could only get appointments every other week. She helped me write an impact statement about how this had affected me: the paranoia about my own space, the disgust knowing strangers had watched videos of my bed, the violation of my grandmother's memory through that stuffed elephant. Writing it all down somehow made it more real and more manageable at the same time. 2 weeks after the ceremony disaster, I was eating breakfast in the dining hall when CNN played footage of Hazel being arrested. She was wearing designer clothes and trying to hide her face, but the mugshot they showed afterward captured her perfectly, finally looking scared instead of smug. They'd picked her up at her parents' house at 6 a.m., and neighbors told reporters she'd been crying and begging her dad to fix it as they put her in the police car. The university finally announced new policies, mandatory room inspections, camera detection equipment, and actual consequences for violations. They created a victim support fund that everyone could see was just damage control, but at least it was something. They also hired new residential life staff who actually seemed to care more about student safety than keeping donors happy. At Hazel's bail hearing, things got even worse for her. The prosecutor revealed she'd kept a detailed spreadsheet of multiple girls' class schedules, not just mine. She'd been systematically tracking when different rooms would be empty, rating them by potential, with notes about which beds would be best for filming. The judge set bail at $100,000 and banned her from any college campus in the state. Felix posted it immediately, but Hazel had to wear an ankle monitor and couldn't leave her parents' house except for legal meetings. Her family tried to settle everything quietly through their lawyers, offering money to make it all go away. But Lillian said absolutely not. We were going public with a civil suit. Other victims joined the case, and suddenly the Dodsons were facing millions in damages. Lillian explained that beyond the criminal charges, Hazel had violated our privacy rights, intentionally inflicted emotional distress, and profited from it all. The civil case would make sure she couldn't just serve some time and move on like nothing happened. The criminal trial started 3 months later. Hazel showed up in a conservative suit, trying to look innocent and young, but nobody was buying it. Her lawyer actually tried to argue it was performance art, and that she was exploring themes of intimacy and privacy in the digital age. The prosecutor's face when he said that was priceless. She actually laughed out loud before apologizing to the judge. When I had to testify, I thought I'd fall apart, but looking at Hazel sitting there with her head down gave me strength. I told the jury about finding everything that Tuesday, about my grandmother's elephant that meant everything to me being used as a prop in her videos, about feeling violated in what should have been my safe space. I talked about how I still couldn't sleep properly, how I'd thrown away all my bedding and most of my clothes, how I couldn't trust any space anymore. Hazel wouldn't look at me the entire time, and for the first time since this started, she actually looked ashamed instead of defiant. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before coming back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Hazel completely broke down sobbing when she realized she was actually going to prison, not getting bailed out by daddy's money this time. Felix stormed out of the courtroom yelling about appeals and how his lawyers would destroy everyone involved, while Hazel's mom, who I'd never seen before, quietly approached me in the hallway and whispered, "I'm sorry," before her husband dragged her away. The judge took his time at sentencing, and honestly, I was grateful for that. He went through every single count, explaining how Hazel had violated not just my privacy, but basic human decency. When he got to the part about my grandmother's elephant, his voice actually got harder, saying, "The defendant showed a calculated cruelty in using objects of deep personal significance to the victim. How did they track down all those other victims at different schools so fast? The way this spread from one dorm room to a whole system problem makes me wonder if schools have been hiding this stuff everywhere." Hazel sat there in her conservative suit looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, and when the judge announced 18 months in prison, she made this wounded animal sound that I'll never forget. Additionally, he continued, and the courtroom went silent, 3 years probation following release, and mandatory registration as a sex offender. That's when Hazel completely lost it, sobbing so hard her lawyer had to hold her up. The judge wasn't done though. He looked directly at her and said, "Miss Dodson, your crimes weren't impulsive mistakes. You maintained a spreadsheet of potential victims. You timed your violations precisely. You profited from them. This was predatory behavior, and the court treats it as such." Felix exploded out of his seat screaming about how this would ruin his daughter's life, how we were destroying her future over college pranks. The judge had him removed from the courtroom, but we could still hear him in the hallway yelling at his lawyers to fix this now. Hazel's mom stayed in her seat, and I swear she looked almost relieved, like maybe prison would finally teach her daughter something that all of daddy's money never could. After the criminal case wrapped up, Lillian went full force on the civil suit. The Dodsons tried every trick, claiming I'd given implicit consent by by sharing the room, that the emotional damages were exaggerated, even suggesting I'd known all along and was complicit. But Lillian had receipts for everything, including therapy bills, the cost of replacing literally everything I owned, and testimony from the other girls Hazel had been planning to target next. The settlement negotiations were brutal. Felix kept trying to lowball us, offering insulting amounts with NDAs attached. But then Lillian pulled out her ace. She'd found evidence that Hazel had been doing this at her high school too, filming in other girls' locker room spaces. Suddenly, the Dodsons were looking at potential criminal charges in another state, and their lawyer's attitude changed real quick. We settled for an amount I can't legally disclose, but let's just say it covered a lot more than new bedding. Every victim got compensated, and there was enough left over to fund a campus safety program for years. The best part? No NDA. Lillian made sure we could talk about this forever if we wanted to, and Felix had to sign knowing his family's name would always be connected to this scandal. The university finally announced real changes, not just the band-aid solutions they'd tried at first. They hired a whole new residential life team, people who actually understood that student safety mattered more than keeping donors happy. They installed detection equipment in every dorm, started doing random sweeps, and created an anonymous reporting system that actually went to an independent review board, not just back to the same administrators who'd ignored problems before. 6 months after the trial, I was taking summer classes to catch up on what I'd missed during all the legal stuff. They'd given me a single room, no roommate ever again, thank you very much, and I was slowly starting to feel normal again. Some nights I still woke up paranoid, checking for cameras that weren't there, but my therapist said that was normal after what happened. Nathan had become something of a campus hero after everything went down. He started teaching free workshops on digital privacy and how to detect hidden cameras, and literally hundreds of students showed up. He told me once that taking down Hazel was the most meaningful thing he'd done in his 4 years of college, way better than any internship or academic achievement. He even got recruited by a cybersecurity firm specifically because of his work on our case. The weirdest part was getting messages from girls at other schools, some even in different countries, saying my story had helped them recognize and report their own situations. This one girl from Ohio wrote that she'd been too scared to say anything about her roommate's boyfriend constantly being in their room during her classes, but after seeing what happened with Hazel, she finally went to her RA. Turns out the boyfriend had been going through her stuff and stealing her underwear. Reading those messages was heavy, but it also made everything we'd gone through feel worthwhile. I found out through the grapevine that Hazel was working in her dad's company now, but not in any real position. She was basically filing papers in the basement where she couldn't interact with anyone. Her sex offender registration meant she couldn't work most places, and Daddy's company was the only option. Someone who worked there told me she had to eat lunch alone because none of the other employees would talk to her. Part of me felt bad for about 2 seconds. Then I remembered her laughing about my virgin bed and the feeling passed. The university put up a plaque in the residential life office with new policies named after our case, though they carefully didn't use any names. It outlined student rights, protection protocols, and mandatory reporting procedures. Every incoming freshman had to attend a seminar about consent, privacy, and respecting shared spaces. They even brought in survivors to speak, and yeah, I did it once. Telling a room full of 18-year-olds about finding those videos was terrifying, but when 5 girls came up afterward saying they'd check their rooms more carefully now, I knew it mattered. Aria Phelps and I became really close through everything. She'd been the first one to stand up for me at that ceremony, and she never left my side through all the legal proceedings. We ended up getting an apartment together off campus for senior year, and having a roommate I actually trusted was healing in ways I didn't expect. We had this running joke where we'd dramatically announce, "I'm going to class now," and the other would yell back, "I shall respect your space and not film anything weird." Dark humor, but it helped. Cameron Wong used her position in student government to push through even more changes. She created a victim advocacy program that paired people going through housing violations with students who'd been through similar experiences. She asked if I wanted to be a mentor, but I wasn't ready for that yet. Maybe someday, but I was still processing my own stuff. The anniversary of finding those videos was harder than I expected. I thought I'd be fine. It had been a year, Hazel was in prison, I'd won both cases, but I spent the whole day feeling sick and paranoid. My therapist had warned me about anniversary reactions, but knowing it was normal didn't make it easier. Aria skipped her classes to stay with me, and we watched stupid movies and ate too much ice cream until the day passed. Then came graduation. I'd wondered if I'd even make it this far after everything that happened, but there I was, walking across that stage in my cap and gown. The crowd was huge, and when they called my name, this massive cheer went up from the student section. People I didn't even know were standing and applauding, and the new residential director, the one they'd hired after the old one got fired, actually stopped to shake my hand and whisper, "Thank you for making this place safer." My parents were crying in the audience, and even my dad, who never shows emotion about anything, was wiping his eyes. They'd been through their own journey with this, dealing with guilt about not protecting me, anger at the university, and pride at how I'd handled everything. My mom had joined some online support group for parents of children who'd experienced campus violations, and she'd become this fierce advocate for policy changes at universities across the state. The week after graduation, I got a call from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell my story. She'd been following campus assault cases for years, and said mine was different because of how public the justice had been. I almost said no, I was so tired of talking about it, but then she mentioned that 3 other universities had already changed their policies specifically because of what happened with Hazel. That made me think maybe one more retelling could help even more people. During filming, they interviewed everyone involved except Hazel and her family, obviously. Nathan came in with his laptop and showed them exactly how he'd traced the payment trails and set up the backup connections that kept the video playing at the ceremony. He'd actually written a whole paper about digital evidence preservation for his senior senior thesis, using our case as the framework. His professor submitted it to some cybersecurity journal, and it got published with both our names on it. The weirdest interview was with the former residential director. He'd agreed to talk on camera, probably trying to rehabilitate his image, but he ended up basically confessing to everything. He admitted he'd been told to protect the institution's interests when it came to donor families, and that he'd personally buried 3 separate complaints about suspicious activity around our room. The documentary crew just let him keep talking while he dug himself deeper, explaining how he'd thought it was probably just roommate drama, even after multiple reports. Bye. He was crying and saying he'd failed in his duty of care. No sympathy from me, though. He'd chosen donor money over student safety every single time. 6 months after graduation, I was working at a nonprofit that helped college students dealing with privacy violations. It wasn't my original career plan. I'd been pre-law. But after everything that happened, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. We'd get calls from terrified kids who'd found cameras in their dorms, or whose roommates were doing sketchy things, and I'd walk them through exactly what to do, who to contact, how to preserve evidence. Sometimes I'd recognize that shaky voice I'd had when I first found those videos, and I'd tell them straight up, I've been there. 18 months seems really light for someone who kept a spreadsheet of victims. Felix losing it in court while his wife sits there looking relieved makes me wonder what their home life was really like all these years. You're going to get through this. The civil settlement money had been enough to pay off my student loans and put a down payment on a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and nobody else had a key. I'd thought having my own space would immediately fix everything, but I still checked for cameras constantly. My therapist said it might take years for that paranoia to fade, and some days it felt like it was getting worse, not better. But then I'd get a message from some girl saying my story had helped her, and it would remind me why going public had been worth it. Arya and I stayed close even after she moved across the country for grad school. We had this running text thread where we'd send each other the most ridiculous roommate horror stories we could find online, always ending with "but at least they didn't film porn on your bed for money." Dark humor had become our way of processing everything. She was the only person who really got it when I'd have random bad days triggered by something stupid like seeing cloud-patterned sheets in a store. Then came the documentary release. They'd titled it The Roommate's Bed, which I thought was a bit sensational, but the filmmaker said it would get people to actually watch it. The premiere was at this film festival, and they flew me out to do a Q&A afterward. Sitting in that dark theater watching my story play out on screen was surreal. They'd included the actual footage from the ceremony. Someone had recorded the whole thing on their phone, and even though I'd lived it, seeing Hazel's face when the video started playing still gave me chills. The Q&A was intense. People wanted to know if I'd forgiven Hazel. No. If I still had nightmares. Yes. If I regretted going public. Never. One woman stood up crying and said her daughter had been through something similar, but the school had convinced her not to pursue charges. She thanked me for showing her that fighting back was possible. After that, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to pull myself together. The documentary went on streaming platforms, and suddenly my story was everywhere again. My inbox exploded with messages, some supportive, some asking for advice, and unfortunately, some from creeps who'd clearly missed the entire point. I had to make all my social media private and change my phone number. The filmmaker had warned me this might happen, but I wasn't prepared for how violating it felt to have strangers discussing my trauma like entertainment. That's when I found out what Hazel had been up to. Someone sent me screenshots from a support group for sex offenders where she was posting under a fake name, but the details made it obvious it was her. She was complaining about how her life had been ruined by a vindictive roommate, and how the registry requirements meant she couldn't even go to Starbucks without people recognizing her. She actually wrote that she was the real victim because she'd lost her future over a misunderstanding about boundaries. The complete lack of accountability even after prison was stunning. Felix Dodson tried to sue the documentary makers for defamation, but that went nowhere fast. The film had only used publicly available court records and interviews with willing participants. His lawsuit actually just brought more attention to the documentary, and it ended up trending on 3 different platforms. Someone leaked that he'd spent over $1 million on legal fees trying to make this all go away, and his company's stock had taken a hit from the bad publicity. A year after the documentary, I was at a conference for victim advocates when I ran into Cameron Wong. She'd gone to law school specifically because of what happened, focusing on victims' rights. We grabbed coffee and talked for hours about how that one horrible semester had completely changed both our life trajectories. She was working on legislation that would make what Hazel did a specific felony with mandatory minimum sentences. No more pleading it down to misdemeanors, she said. No more slaps on the wrist because daddy has money. The legislation actually passed in our state, and they invited me to the signing ceremony. Standing there watching the governor sign Hazel's law. They didn't officially call it that, but everyone knew what it was. Felt like of something. Or maybe the beginning. The law made it a felony to record someone in a private space without consent for commercial purposes, with extra penalties if you use their personal belongings in the recordings. 3 years after graduation, I was doing a training session for new residential advisors at a different university. I'd gotten pretty good at these talks, keeping it educational but real, making sure they understood that their job was to protect students, not the institution. During the Q&A, this young RA asked what happened to Hazel after everything. I told them the truth. Last I'd heard, she was still working in her father's company basement, still on the registry, still had 3 more years of probation. She'd tried to change her name legally, but the judge denied it because of the registry requirements. Someone in the back raised their hand and said they'd actually gone to high school with Hazel. My stomach dropped, wondering if this was going to be some defense of her, but instead, the girl said she did creepy stuff back then too. She got caught recording girls changing for gym class, but her dad made it go away. We tried to warn people when she went to college, but nobody listened. The room went dead silent. Turns out there'd been a pattern going back years, and I was just the first person her daddy literally couldn't buy off. That revelation led to a whole new investigation. 3 girls from her high school came forward with their own stories, and suddenly Hazel was facing charges in another state. Felix tried his usual checkbook routine, but these prosecutors weren't having it. She ended up pleading guilty to avoid another trial, adding 2 more years to her probation and expanding her registry requirements to multiple states. The university where everything happened eventually invited me back for a special ceremony. They were dedicating a new center for student safety and wanted me to cut the ribbon. I almost said no. That campus still gave me anxiety, but Aria flew in to go with me, and having her there made it bearable. The new residential director gave this speech about how my bravery had transformed not just their policies, but the entire culture around student safety. They'd gone from one of the worst schools for handling these issues to a model for others to follow. Standing there with those giant scissors, I thought about that Tuesday when I'd walked into our dorm room just to grab a textbook. How different my life would be if I'd just gone to class without it. But then I looked at the crowd, all these young students who would be safer because of what I'd gone through, and I knew I wouldn't change it. Well, I'd change Hazel doing it in the first place, obviously, but not my response to it. The ribbon cutting made the news again, and that night my mom called crying. She'd been so worried about me for so long, but seeing me up there, helping other students, had finally convinced her I was really okay. You turned something horrible into something powerful, she said. My dad got on the phone too, which was rare, and told me he was proud of how I'd handled everything. You didn't let them silence you, he said. You didn't let them make you small. 5 years out now, I run a whole department at the nonprofit. We've helped hundreds of students, gotten dozens of predators expelled or arrested, and pushed through legislation in 12 states. My therapist says I've turned my trauma into purpose, which sounds very therapy speak, but she's not wrong. Some days are still hard. I might see something that reminds me of that semester and just lose the whole day to anxiety. But most days, I'm okay. More than okay, actually. I found out recently that Hazel had violated her probation by trying to contact one of the other victims from our dorm. She'd sent this long, rambling email about how we'd all ruined her life and she deserved an apology. The girl immediately forwarded it to the authorities, and Hazel got another 6 months in jail plus extended probation. Felix apparently had a heart attack when he heard, though he survived. His company quietly removed him from the board after shareholders complained about the ongoing negative publicity. The last update I got was from Nathan, who'd become something of an expert witness in these cases through his cybersecurity work. He testified in a case where a guy had hidden cameras in his girlfriend's apartment, and his testimony about digital forensics helped get the conviction. He texted me after, "Another creep down. You started something big." Sometimes I Google myself and see all the articles, the documentary, the think pieces about campus safety and victims' rights. It's weird being known for the worst thing that ever happened to me. But then I'll get an email from some scared 18-year-old who just found out their roommate has been violating their privacy, and they'll say, "I saw your story. What do I do?" And I'll write back immediately. First, you're going to be okay. Second, here's exactly what you need to do. And I'll walk them through it, step by step, making sure they know they're not alone. That's the thing about trauma that becomes public. It stops being just yours. It becomes this shared reference point, this cautionary tale, this rallying cry for change. Some days I wish I could just be anonymous again, just be someone whose biggest college drama was failing a test or having a bad breakup. But that's not my story. My story is about walking into a dorm room on a Tuesday and finding out my roommate had been violating me for months, then refusing to let her get away with it. And honestly, I'm proud of that girl who stood up in that auditorium and pressed play. She didn't know she was about to change laws and save other victims. She just knew she wasn't going to let Hazel stand up there with that award pretending to be something she wasn't. That girl was braver than she knew. And on my bad days, I try to remember that she's still in me somewhere, ready to fight when it matters. Appreciate you sticking around and exploring all these questions with me today. Honestly, what a ride. Can't wait for the next adventure we get into together. Like the video on it helps more than you think.